Good morning. Alay Patel here, and weekly summary for chapter number 5. I would be discussing different types of contracts that we go through the chapter, and also a couple of definitions that I think is important. So, starting off with the bilateral contract, I found this interesting. And bilateral contract is defined as a contract that contains two promises, the offer and the acceptance. There are two types of promises in bilateral contract. First is the offer, and the second one is acceptance. As per the definition, bilateral is similar to a two-way contract because it involves the party that is. I mean, it involves both the parties and commitment for both the parties and promises that they will act upon their respective terms. For instance, Real Madrid recently signed Cristiano Ronaldo again for 5 years for $70 million. Now, in this scenario, Real Madrid expects Ronaldo to play for them for 4 years, and in return, Ronaldo would get 70 million only if he plays for 4 consecutive years. Hence, this is a two-way contract where both the parties are keeping their respective promises. Another term is the unilateral contract, which is similar to bilateral contract but not really. It is defined as a contract in which the offeree accepts by performance rather than the promise. In this scenario, only one party makes a promise, the other party does not make a promise, but instead of making a promise, the other party makes sure to repay it by some act in exchange. Um, Health insurance is the best is the best example that can be given in this scenario, as whenever as the players make sure that they pay premiums for their insurance, hence they're fulfilling the promise. But in return, whenever they get injured or are hospitalized or anything, the insurance company makes sure that the insurance company makes sure that they pay the premiums for that the insurance company, sorry, agrees to pay out the premiums if the athlete undergoes an injury. uh, the another interesting thing that I found in this chapter was the provisions, typical provisions. It had two subdivisions under it, which are also two different types of contracts. The first one is the oral contracts. Oral contracts are basically contracts that are orally outspoken, but and can be oral contracts can be legally enforced if there is a valid offer, acceptance, and consideration. Although there are some risks with the oral contract, as in the past there have been instances where people usually breach oral contracts. The other type of contract is the written contract. Written contract are more firm, more strong in my opinion, as people cannot fraud. Uh, Written contracts are the safest, as I said earlier. They contain some general provisions that are common in most contracts, like party designation, terms, warranties and representations, obligations and duties, and finally the termination. The fourth definition that I found interesting was collective bargaining agreement, which has to be included if we're discussing about the contracts. It is basically a written agreement between employers and employees that provides the exact terms and conditions of the employment relationship between the two parties. CBAs are usually 100 pages long. They have so much stuff, but I would just state some of the important ones that I found here. So it includes player salaries, terms and conditions, code of conduct, drug testing provisions to make sure athletes follow and do not involve in any drug activities, amateur draft rules, which is a very important one, and they just recently modified it, as far as I can recall it. And also CBS are different for different leagues, but they are mostly common. Um, uh, the only difference, I think, in my opinion, would be the media and television rights and stuff, where the duration, where the interview can interview players for a specific time period and stuff differs. And the last definition is the game and event contracts. I wasn't aware about the contract before reading this chapter. I knew that there might be, but I wasn't sure about it, and I did not like research. But when I came over this topic, I had to include this, as these are event specific contracts that sport organizations and managers go through prior to hosting an event. Some specifics that the game and event contracts contain needs to be taken care of are time and date to be obvious, venue availability, ability to use and display trademarks, names, logos, television and radio rights, travel expenses. All these are the factors that managers and sport organizations need to consider if they want to host a sporting event.